Hey guys, this is a pregame.com video and podcast for August 19th, and this is segment 2 of 3 in which we do big game previews. Every week in this second segment, we're going to do big game previews, and if you're watching right now on video, you can get all segments at pregame.tv. Okay, so preseason week 2. Instead of looking at any individual game, I want our experts here to talk about handicapping in general between week 1 and week 2 of the preseason. Vegas Runner, and for you guys that don't know, Vegas Runner is a actual professional bettor here in Vegas, and he brings that perspective to the table. Vegas Runner.
This year preseason was a little bit different for everyone, especially the wise guys and the sharp money. Reason being, we got 11 new coaches in the NFL. And I think that's one of the major reasons we saw some of the line moves fail, and also one of the main reasons we saw the wise guys sit out at a lot of games. When you saw the moves this week...
So let's talk about that a minute. So you're saying, one, that if we looked at the games that moved significantly, now are we measuring the line move significantly? Are we measuring that by just having a big line move, or are we knowing that because of your insight that this was a wise guy move?
Yeah, not necessarily a big line move, because, again, the sports books beat the wise guys to a move many times, so it's not necessarily them making the adjustment will be made by the sports book without the money coming in at times. With an injury, like we saw the quarterbacks getting hurt in practice, they adjusted 3 points right away.
So there was a line move, but it wasn't based on money.
Exactly. I'm talking about the actual steam, the plays that they sent out as buy orders that we saw guys run to the window, your normal guys that move the money for them. And they took a very selective approach this week.
So less games, and how did the games do?
Not good results at all. Actually, I was a little surprised because preseason is when they really do a lot of damage because they have so much more information than your casual bettor. And we saw that this year, like I said, with the 11 new coaches, they had to take more of a wait-and-see approach than go all out, because what we see with coaches is they have a tendency of what they do in the preseason, and pretty much what they do one year, they do the next year and the following year. So I think that was one of the main reasons for that. Another thing I think that the betting...
We'll jump in, though, is the fact of how the coaches do is usually about their focus and their how much they prioritize the preseason.
Exactly. A perfect example, Ken Weisenheit from Arizona. New coach, only had 2 seasons. But already I heard down on the strip, he never covers the first game or the last game. He's 0-4. And what happened? First game this year, that's the game the wise guys were waiting to bet against Arizona. And what did he do? He lost. So they have little things like that they pull out year after year.
And clearly the more history you have, the more... quality, those kind of trends are going to
the bigger sample size, the more I think you could trust the results, the long-term results.
To jump in and draw, one thing that VR said about the line moves in preseason football, unlike in regular season, when you see a line move early, not necessarily going to be steam money as you talk about the wise guy moving money, because once the coaches, and all of them do in preseason, announce pretty much what they're going to do, their agenda, how far they're going to go with starters, generally that stuff starts to leak out on Thursday with their press conference. Vegas will make a line move based off of that immediately when they hear that. So
the line is moving on information, not moving on action.
Yes.
And to jump in, you can see the difference between, in the end, we move the line, the betting public, when it's all said and done. And where you could see the big difference between a wise guy move and the betting public adjusting the line is in the increments the line moves. And you saw a lot of that last week. You didn't see 1.5, 2-point line moves on a total. Yes, that was the final result, but it got there in half-point increments. It didn't get there as one big move. When you see one big move, that means more times than not, everybody is nailing the books at the same time. But when you see half-point increments throughout the week, that's more generated by betting public and word of mouth, people getting down on the game.
All right, so getting away for a minute from what you're saying, which is pretty strong, increments. VR using the word increments. Is that the upset of the week so far? Honestly, did you prep that?
No,
Or it was just
you
off the
know
top
me.
of
Off the top of my head.
just boom, boom.
I respect. I'm always going to be prepared for them, but I live and breathe it, so it's going to come
increments.
normal. Yeah, you're not going to see too many notes in my hand.
All right, so one of the things we try to do with our sports betting preview show here is we try to give actionable information. So one thing I'm hearing now for the rest of the 2009 preseason, let's be a little bit apprehensive and be a little bit conservative when it comes to whoever out there might be following line moves. And some guys, that's a profession, is reading the marketplace. And what does these line moves mean? You're telling us from the inside here in Vegas that these wise guys aren't as strong and aren't feeling as comfortable as they normally do in the preseason.
I couldn't have put it better. That's exactly what's happening, and the line moves are showing that so far.
Now, Marco, when we were prepping for the show, you were talking about, I thought, a very powerful concept in the preseason, which is the contrast from last week. Tell us about that.
Oh, absolutely. In an earlier podcast, we had talked about when you handicap preseason football, you got to throw stats out. Coaches have agendas in the preseason, and if a team had a poor performance last week on one side of the ball, let's say the offense, they scored maybe less than 10 points, they're going to work on the offense hard this week to get the kinks out. And VR, you were talking about the record from last year on the over-unders, how much the games that were low scoring the following week, those teams were high scoring. And that just proves my point. The coaches work dramatically on what they had a shortfall on the week before.
Okay, so between week 1 and 2, if we see a team that was high scoring, they're probably going to work more on defense. And if the defense gave up a lot of points, then they're going to be working on defense. So you can just look for there to be a contrast from last week. If a team went over, look towards the under, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
Now, this is more with totals because it's going to be hard for a team to try. I mean, I guess it could try harder because motivation in the preseason is always a question. So if a team, and I think that is another zigzaggy thing, is if a team did very poorly last week, look for a maximum effort even though it's week 2.
Right, because nobody wants to start a season with a bad taste in their mouth. You know, when you start losing, it doesn't take long for that to start to creep into your mind in a mindset. Most coaches don't want to go into the regular season with a 1-3 record. Even though they don't count, they don't want to go on a bad note.
All right, so the takeaways here, and again, it's all about actionable items for the audience, is if a team went way over, look towards the under. If a team went way under, look towards the over. And if a team played very poorly, look for a better performance.
Well, like you said, the key to the show is to give you actual information that you're going to be able to profit from in the future. And a nice little trend that I've been following year in and year out in week 2 of the preseason is the overs. And it just makes sense. I mean, we saw it from the two teams that played in the Hall of Fame game. Both scored 27 points their next week out. And that's a trend that happens year in and year out. Last year, we had 16 games, 11 overs, 5 unders. Year before, 16 games, 12 overs, 4 unders. Now, last season, there were 4 teams that scored 10 points or less the first week. Each one of them teams, Marco, scored 24 or more points the following week. So the data supports what you said. Yeah, you could bet every over and probably come out ahead. But I think you can really focus in on them teams that didn't produce, and that's going to be the focus for the week.
So wrapping up here, this segment is we got 2 concepts that actually dovetail into a single concept. Is we're looking to zigzag or contrast from last week. Week 2s are generally towards the over. Thus, the perfect games here, or the ideal games to be looking at, are going to be the over games for teams that actually scored poorly or low in week 1.
And you're going to get even more value because the public perception is that these teams don't have offense.
That's exactly right. Okay, so we're wrapping up this week's segment when it comes to the big game previews, though we talked about all the preseason games. Remember, segment number 3 is free picks. We'll be back, and if you're on video, you can get them all at pregame.tv.